So one of the reasons I'm very drawn to Tantra is because I feel that the collective consciousness needs a lot of healing, particularly when it comes to the realm of female sexuality. We have a lot of very false ideas about women and how female sexuality is, and so I wanted to discuss 5 of these myths and how they're not true. The first myth is the idea that in sex women fall in love, whereas men are not attached in the same way. This isn't true because when two people have sex, they're both releasing oxytocin, which is known as the love bonding hormone. And there's lots of studies that show that both men and women secrete this hormone. It's done so that in case there's a child, they will be together and be able to raise the child together. Also, oxytocin is not released only during sex, but it can be released from hugging, cuddling, touching. So there's also that idea that sex makes people attached and not able to get away, but it's more emotional proximity and the hormones that make people attached, not only sex. The second myth is the idea that men are more sexually promiscuous than women. People use the argument that because men produce a lot of sperm while women only make 1 egg per month, that means that the sperm is expendable and the woman has to be more careful. Spiritually speaking, a man's sperm is his chi, it's his life force energy, and it's actually very expensive for a male body to create this life force. And people who use it up too much earlier in their years end up having problems of being depleted later on. So both sperm and eggs are spiritually valuable and not something that is easily wasted. Because socially women are shamed from freely engaging in sex, a lot of people assume that women are just simply not as interested. But this is generations worth of shaming and ostracism that causes women to be more careful in engaging in sex freely. It doesn't mean that they don't have the exact same desires that men do. The third myth is the idea that men are more likely to cheat in a relationship and that they have less self-control than women do. There's this idea that women are more loyal and men are just, boys will be boys, they can't really control themselves sexually. This is again false because historically speaking, women were very financially dependent on men, so the consequences for a woman being unfaithful were severe. It meant she would be out on the streets, or even some cultures would face death, whereas for men the consequences have historically been less intense because he's the head of the household. He doesn't have the same consequences for being unfaithful. The fourth myth is the idea of sexual fluidity. People assume that women are more sexually fluid than men are, that women are more likely to be bisexual or to experiment with other women as opposed to men having the desire to experiment with other men, etc. This is heavily perpetuated by the pornography industry and the media. Because socially, people are a lot more acceptable of seeing woman-on-woman action, we assume that women have this natural inclination to be sexually fluid. In fact, it's probably equal for men and women. There's no solid evidence that women are more sexually fluid than men. I believe that this is another idea that has been perpetuated to further sexualize the female body, the female form. This myth being perpetuated by the idea that a woman's body is more sexy or sexual is another myth that people heavily believe. We've been taught that a woman's body is sexy and beautiful, but a man's body is something just functional or has a productive role. Again, if you think about it, when you watch movies or things on TV, when we see a woman's body, it's usually very sexualized and eroticized. you'll see a sexy woman nude in a love scene or in some type of modeling or something where the woman's body is shown in an attractive way. When we see men's bodies, it's usually in a sort of comical way. It's made out to be a joke. Usually it's a man's body part not being attractive, not a very attractive man is used. So I think it's important to examine the beliefs that we've accepted and see if they're really true. I'm sure you guys can see that there's already a lot of shifts happening in these beliefs, and it's taken a long time, but people are finally accepting that as men and women we're really not that different.